There are some people out there who advocate blame solves nothing. In the cases where somebody is really trying to do something they shouldn't do, that may be appropriate to say, listen, you can't work here anymore. What I would say instead is blame is an addiction. If you start going down the blame road, you might find that you like it. That's going to be the problem. People, many leaders I've seen get addicted to blame. And anything that comes across their desk, they want to go, well, find me who to hold responsible.
Hey, and welcome to the Electrical Safety Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Travis, and today I'm joined by Jake Mazulewicz. I think I got that right.
Perfect. I couldn't ask for better. You must have some Polish in you somewhere.
Great. I don't know if I do, but we'll go with it. So, Jake, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Sure.
And I guess I always let everyone kind of give their own introduction, bit of a backstory maybe on how you got involved in what you do today, and you can go as far back as you like. That's relevant.
Well,
yeah, and we can just kind of go from there.
wow. How did I wind up doing what I'm doing today? Short answer, I lost a bet. So, there's that.
Yeah.
I have a long, weird kind of meandering path. What's the interesting kind of short version of it? Went to college, just went to a cool liberal arts college, small college, like 1,200 students there, middle of nowhere, rural Virginia. And to give you an idea of how rural, the closest place was Farmville. That was the name of the town. It was 9 miles away, so it was pretty rural. And I'm like, I'm a 19-year-old, 18-year-old college student, kind of going, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm taking classes. I'm learning how to write. I actually had a really good professor for what they called rhetoric and French. Same professor was an ex-Green Beret, 2 tours in Vietnam, learned how to speak French in Vietnam, and had a really unique writing style, and loved doing that. But I'm sort of like, what do I do? I'm not sure. I'm taking classes, and I'm wanting something else. I'm wanting something special, something different. And I wasn't into sports. Wasn't very good at sports, played a little soccer, wasn't too big into drinking, was not into the fraternity scene. I'm like, well, what the hell else is there to do? I mean, I'm going to be here for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what I discovered was the fire department. My college had a fire department, and it wasn't just for the college. It was for the surrounding area. It just happened to be based at the college, all volunteer. And we had a 67 square mile first due. And if you're a first responder or something, that's an enormous, huge first due area. We were the first people to be called out in that area. And it was the craziest thing I'd ever done. My resident advisor was in it. His name was Brett, remembering this from 30 years ago. And I signed up. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I've never done anything like this before. Went through the training, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. The gear is cool. The trucks are kind of neat. All stick shift, double clutch, split axle, old trucks is back in the 1980s. And I'm like, then I went on the first fire, and I'm like, this is scary, because it was a dumpster fire, like literally a dumpster fire, right? You've been in meetings sometimes where it's like, this meeting is a dumpster fire. I've been on an actual dumpster fire. And they've been in a couple of meetings which were almost that bad. So there is that reality.
Yeah.
And we got back from the training. We got back from the fire, and, we cleaned up, we recharged the air tanks, and we cleaned up the hoses, took off all the turnout gear, sweaty, nasty stuff, hung it back up. And I'm like, well, I guess we go home now. And a guy kind of buttonholed me, and he said, no, you're new here. And I'm like, great, hazing, wonderful, just what we need.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And what we did was, there's about 15 people on the fire. Some of them had to go home. They had to rush home, whatever, kids or whatever. And then about 9 or 10 of us stayed around, and we did something that I had never done before. I had never heard of before. And it was called an after action review. And it was the chief, I thought the chief was going to tell us, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? And that's not what it was at all. The chief of this incredibly progressive fire department, which was decades ahead of its time, the chief sat down and basically wrote up on the board, didn't sit down, but wrote up on the board 5 questions. What did we set out to do? What did we actually do? How did it turn out the way that it did? What are we going to do the same way next time? And what are we going to do differently next time? And he wrote up those questions on an old green slate chalkboard. If you remember that really old school, right? The old chalk and the green slate chalkboard. And then he kind of shut up, and the pump operator spoke up, and the attack line crew guys spoke up, and the tanker truck, we had a tanker truck because it's rural, no fire hydrants out there, guys spoke up, and the people doing traffic control and everything spoke up. And I'm sitting here listening because my first fire, I didn't have a lot to say. And I went, I'm hooked. If not for the gear and the adventure and the adrenaline and the camaraderie, just the friends that I made that I kept for years, I'm hooked on these conversations. That was the most engaging conversation I had ever been in 19 years.
Mhm.
And I went, what the hell was that? And, you know, and Tim, who's the guy who kind of got me into it, said, that was an after action review. And I just went, where do I get more of these? He said, we try to do it after every fire. We don't have time always to do it after every fire, but we do it at least probably twice a week.
Yeah.
And I just went, well, that was what I want to learn more. And he's like, you're in the right place. Just keep doing what you're doing. And so for the next 3 years, I kind of rose up kind of the ranks, learned to drive all the trucks. And in the last 6 months, when I was a senior, I actually got to the rank of 3rd lieutenant. There's 5 command lines, 5 commanders or officers. And the lowest one was 3rd lieutenant, which was usually reserved for a student at the college. The rest were like faculty. And I was 3rd lieutenant on a volunteer fire department for about 6 months, and actually got to command briefly just 2 fire scenes. But that was it. But that was kind of my intro into the world of technical training, into safety, into risk, into reliability. We had a student die the year before I got there. This was no joke. This wasn't just, washing trucks and having fun. We had a student get killed. 2 trucks crashed into each other on an icy road. And I didn't tell my parents that when I joined the fire department. I kind of left that part out. But that's when I first started getting into all this more technical stuff, the boots on the ground stuff. And it was in the fire department was very technical. We did training every week, right, on the technical stuff, but it was also very humanistic. The chief of the department, who happened to be the professor of economics at the college, was just years or decades ahead of his time in he built psychological safety before that was ever a term. He built trust with people. He did all the right things that leaders and managers are supposed to do. Very human-based, he took what I now call a learning-based approach as opposed to a control-based approach. He would almost never say, you broke the rules, or the word violation, I don't think ever came out of his mouth. I can't remember him ever saying that. I can't remember him ever saying, what you did was wrong. He would talk about errors and misunderstandings, but it was always, okay, that's a signal for us to work on this and get a little bit better. So let's do a training evolution on that, see if we can get better. How would you guys and ladies do it better? So there was so much human performance and high reliability organization stuff and resilience in that little fire department. I thought, wow, every organization works like this. I can't wait to get out into the work world. So I graduated, and then I kind of had the eye-opening stuff, which was, wow, almost no organization works that way. And in some ways, John, that my career now doing human reliability and this very kind of human-based, learning-based approach to technical work, mostly what I've been trying to do is recreate the culture of that amazing little fire department that was Camelot that I volunteered for 3 years in college. Does that make any sense?
No, totally. And I guess the next thing I was going to ask you was, so you kind of got a glimpse of this, but then you went out into the work world and so can you maybe just paint a little bit of a picture of what that path looked like, maybe some of the things that you saw that opened your eyes that, oh, the fire department was different. And then, when did you sort of make that transition into what you're doing today?
There's the few interesting steps in between, but I'll give you just the Facebook version of them. I graduated with my degree in psychology, and back then a degree in psychology and $1 would get you a bottle of water. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I got a little bit inspired from my one professor I told you about, and he was a Green Beret. And I went, well, I'm only going to have this chance once in my life. So I enlisted in the Army, to go sign up for Special Forces School. And I did. And I went through basic training, 12B, which is a combat engineer school, airborne school, jump wings, got my jump wings, started, Special Forces School in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, actually a place called Camp McCall, in October, November of 1989. After I was just in the tryouts, broke a bone and left, did a lot of soul searching and decided not to go back. That was a big kind of a switch. But I'm like, okay, maybe the boots on the ground thing, at least doing that wasn't the main thing for me. And I said, well, let me try something completely different. And I went to go be an EMT, emergency medical technician. And this was for a transport service, private transport service. And we did a lot of safety stuff, risk related stuff. I mean, literally I had patients' lives in my hands. It's me and the patient in the back. Got through that, did that for a little while and went, not sure if that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Went to graduate school, got a PhD in education. I went, all right, let me try the other side of the world for a little bit. Decided I didn't want to be a professor and simply write incomprehensible papers. And then went, well, all right, so let me do something else. And I took that PhD and I went into a big electric utility called Dominion into the safety and training side. That's where I really got into the safety and training. I started on the training side, and then after a while got into more the safety. And actually a good friend of mine back then texted me one day and said, hey, you ever heard of that human performance stuff? That's a lot of the kind of stuff, weird stuff that you like. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I've heard about it. So I went and talked about it, took the class, and I went, oh my gosh, all this stuff in human performance is really about communications and decision-making and teamwork and leadership and emotional intelligence and learning from your mistakes. And I'm like, I got a PhD in education. I know some of this stuff. I just don't know it from the safety side. I know it from the intellectual side, but I've also got the boots on the ground background. And then once I got into the human performance stuff, I went, this is what I was meant to do. And it's a really weird mix of human skills, soft skills, and the technical skills. And I found that I had both in kind of this really unique way that nobody else that I knew I've really had.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
It does. But I will say, like, I know, like, we're in the electrical space.
Yeah.
And this has certainly come up in the last few years. Some people have presented on it. I think it would be helpful for everyone listening if we sort of went a little bit deeper on it and in the direction to help them understand, because I feel like a lot of it is still kind of buzzwords almost. People hear human performance and might, if you ask 10 different people what it was, like, they got 10 completely different views.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure the best place to start, but if you just want to maybe give a broad overview and we'll go from there.
So I go back and forth. I don't call, let me put it this way. Waze, the app Waze, the direction finding one, the navigation one.
Yep.
So the guy who invented that, I forget his name right now, but I looked him up just to do some research, and he wrote a book, and I love the title of his book. The title of his book, I think, is Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution. And I really resonated a lot with that because I love talking with people about okay, what's the problem you're facing? And especially if it has to do with errors, miscommunications, misunderstandings, I think I've got some stuff that may help you. But I try not to fall in love with any one particular solution, like safety two or safety differently or HOP or HRO or any other particular model, right? Because once you fall in love with a solution, you wind up kind of creating a religion out of it and kind of going, well, this solution is the solution for everything, everywhere. And religions tend to turn into cults, and that's not healthy. So I like this guy's advice, the creator of ways. And he said, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And so what I've tried to do is stay focused on what is the problem. And the problem that so many people that I work with talk to is, hey, Jake, we had an incident and it was caused by misunderstanding. Now, many people would say, well, the misunderstanding isn't a problem because people always have misunderstandings. Yeah, that's true, but that's the symptom. So let's go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line is, yeah, human performance or HOP is probably the best description of what I do, but I try not to. I mean, I have that on some of my handouts. I think it's on my LinkedIn thing, but so are a few other things as well. But I would not say that I'm a HOP fundamentalist. I'm not. I try to draw from a bunch of different things, and mostly I try to solve the problems that people come to me with. HOP has, I think, some great ideas in it. Some of the principles, the 5 principles that Conklin came up with, I agree with. Others, I don't. I've come up with my own kind of 7 principles. The biggest one is errors are signals, not failures, which I think is good. I think is honest. I try to live by that with my kids, my wife. I mean, if you're trying honestly to do the right thing and you're in good faith and your intentions are transparent, if something goes wrong, that's a signal to do something better, to learn, to change the process. It's not a failure, right? It might even be expensive, and we've had some expensive failures, right? But that's still a signal to make things better. So what I try to do in the work that I do with, and the main groups that I work with are in energy, specifically electricity, because of my background. I try to show them practical ways to prevent dangerous and expensive errors. And there's a whole range of ways to do that, from situational awareness. I developed a model called Scan and Focus. I just published an article on event reviews, which you just recently saw. I use after action reviews, which I learned at the fire department back in the 1980s. So lots of different methods, building resilience. We talked about this a little bit, weak signals, fail safes, practicing uncertainty. It's a great way of doing things. In the fire department, we didn't just practice the right way of doing things. We practiced things going south. When I was in the fire department, one Wednesday night we were doing training, and we put on all the gear, the turnout gear. We put on this SCBA gear, the breathing gear, and we put on the mask, basically a full face mask. Regulator is right here. And we had a little cover that went over the mask, so you couldn't see anything. Your whole face is covered. You can't see anything. So it's not good for claustrophobic people. And it simulates a fire, because in Hollywood, everybody sees fine during a fire. During a real fire, it's full of smoke. You're crawling on the floor because it's the only place you can see a few feet in front of you. So I'm crawling on the floor with dragging a hose, kind of simulating dragging a hose into a place. And I feel somebody kind of stop me, grab my air tank and kind of stop me. And I hear a shelf, like a bookshelf. We're in kind of a little warehouse place, them kind of gently putting a 6-foot bookshelf, laying it down on top of me, pinning me down to the floor. Now I'm wearing 50 pounds of turnout gear, 30-pound, air tank. I have this thing over my face. I can't see. I can't move. I'm not with anybody right next to me, which almost always you are. And I got a hose kind of next to me. And then I felt a hand reach down just in the small of my back and start cranking off the valve to my air tank, turning off my air. So now my full face is covered. I can't get my hands to my face, and I have no air. I did that when I was 19 years old. Now, they had a flashlight. They're right there. I knew that I was safe. Some part of my brain knew that I was safe,
Mm.
but the lizard part of my brain, which activates the fight or flight kind of syndrome, was in full, we got to get the heck out of here mode. And that was kind of the first big response, the first time in my life when I'm like, okay, this is what fear tastes like. This is what it feels like when something is going horribly, horribly wrong. And I forget what actions I took. I mean, I tried to scoot out or move things or, yell, but nobody could hear me, kind of stuff like that. Anyway, we went through the training and I got breathing air from somebody else, did the practice and everything. And then we came out and debriefed it. But that was a great example of practicing resilience, which is expect that things are going to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And have some idea of what you're going to do when things go wrong. Because it's not an if things are going to go wrong, it's a when. So that's why military and emergency services do really well generally at practicing uncertainty with simulations like. Anyway, that's one of the examples I guess I'd roll into when I work with companies. I try to teach fail safes, resources in reserve, weak signals. And when things go wrong, here's what the experts tend to do. They don't just go, oh, well, we got to stop. You can do that in a library. You can do that in a bank. You can even do that in some ways in a nuclear power plant. There's always a big red button on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You press that big red button. It may be expensive, but you can shut down everything. But in most jobs, you can't do that. So one of the things that I try to teach is practicing a lot of resilience. And that's part of, I guess I would call it the learning-based approach to errors and human reliability. And that includes some HOP, some high reliability organization stuff, but that's a little bit of the stuff that I teach and the practical skills that I try to teach when I work with companies. I don't know if that's what you were looking for or not.
I can't remember where we started, but you got me going on the next thing here, which is learning based. And I guess you mentioned it earlier. I wanted to ask you about it.
Yeah.
And I guess it sounded to me more like you've got traditional ways that companies are training and treating safety.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got some new ideas and maybe more practical or more effective ways. And so what do you mean by a learning-based approach? And I guess what does that counter to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Out of this, pretty much all of the work that I do, every workshop that I give, every presentation is based more or less on 7 key principles and 7 practical steps. And I'll give them to you just so all of your people have them. Let's see if I can do them from memory. Step 1 is take a learning-based approach. Step 2 is build psychological safety. Step 3 is lead after action reviews. Step 4 is transform investigations. Step 5, 6, and 7, they get a little bit more technical. Step 5 is apply classic defenses, checklist, pre-check, 3-way communication, stuff like that. Step 6 is improve processes. Step 7 is build resilience. So those are the 7 steps, and pretty much everything that I do goes back to some of those. Sometimes I'll give a workshop or a keynote that's just on after action reviews, like I did for Energy Safety Canada a couple of years ago. It's just 1 hour all on after action reviews. We actually did, I present the idea, I give some tips, the questions, and then I had 800 people turn to a partner and do an after action review.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. But the first step, to go back to the question you asked, the first step is take a learning-based approach. Okay, how and what does that mean? So see all these books behind me? I've read, not everyone, I won't lie to you and say I've read everyone, but probably 90% of the books there. And the pattern that I've seen is there's basically 2 approaches that any person, leader, team, company, industry can take when an error happens. It's basically a control-based approach or a learning-based approach. And here's the rub. everybody takes a little bit of both. It's not one or the other. It's not binary. Everybody takes a little bit control based and a little bit learning based, but everybody also has a preference. Kind of like you can write with both hands, correct? If you needed to, you could write with your non-dominant hand. Are you left or right-handed?
Right.
Right-handed. If you were in a cast or something, you could write with your left hand, yes? But you definitely prefer the right.
Yeah, it wouldn't look very pretty.
Wouldn't look very pretty. It looked like my writing, right? Everybody tends to have sort of a dominant, a go-to approach. And most traditional safety people have a very control-based approach. They look at errors as defects and defects as failures and failures as we got to find who was responsible for that failure and motivate them to not make that failure again.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the classic approach. And in very mechanistic systems, like a car factory or something, it's, you know, you get a completely blue car with a yellow hood. Yeah, that's a defect. And nobody's going to buy that car, right? Maybe some people would. And so that's an error, and we need to figure out the root cause of that. That works great in mechanical systems. But in human systems, we got to take a more adaptive approach. People are always making errors. People are always having misunderstandings and miscommunications, adjustments, assumptions. We're always doing that. Most of the time, we either catch them and learn from them and adjust, or they don't have any consequences. Every now and again, humans are going to make misunderstandings that have big consequences. And that's when traditional leaders snap into this mechanistic mode and go, well, now it's a failure, like a yellow hood and a blue car, and we got to find a root cause. Trouble is, there are no root causes in human-based misunderstandings, miscommunications. You can label one, but you're never going to find the root cause of a miscommunication, I don't think. The way you're going to find, wow, hey, the water pump went out because the wrong kind of grease was used.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that kind of makes me back to what I was saying about how just in general, when people talk about human performance, I think they kind of like, yeah, it's kind of neat, but they don't, it's like, it's almost like not concrete enough. And so they love to go back to the blue car with a yellow hood because they can very much put their finger on it and say, well, this is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's a little bit more abstract maybe, but so what you're saying is that you have, so a learning based approach. And I'll use this example and tell me if I'm wrong or not here. So usually when something happens in my house where one of the kids has broken something, or who knows, I usually, maybe not the best question to start with, but I usually want to know who did it. But it's not because I want to punish him. Maybe I do, but what I'm actually getting at is, first I want to ask him some questions as to how did this what happened? How did this unfold?
Right.
And then I'm hoping that we can learn something from that, and then all of us can have a takeaway.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not so much to point the finger and say, well, you broke this thing, so therefore you got to go to your room and all that. It's more to get an understanding of what happened so that we can all learn from it. Even I still don't think anyone listens to me anyway. Okay, so that's the learning based approach.
Yeah, you got it. That's it. It's we all, I think almost everybody, I won't say, I don't tend to like absolutes, so I won't say everybody, but most people that I've met, and including me, and I think including you, when something goes wrong, we have this natural visceral approach or reaction to an error is some chaos, right? It's a little bit of, hey, this was unexpected. It's a bad surprise. Things are going wrong. And we, all of us humans, we live in a fragile world, right? We have pretty fragile bodies. We could walk across the street and get hit by a car. So control is a big thing that we need and that we want. And an error in our lives, in our world, in our house takes that feeling of control away. So what I think we all have, our first reaction is, I want to get that control back. I want to know who did this. I want to know what we can do to make sure this never happens again, right? The classic words. And that goes through our mind. It goes through my mind. But that's sort of the initial reaction. That's initial response. We can have an initial response to many other things that we've learned that our initial response might not be the best response, right? We're civilized. We've learned not to pull out a baseball bat and hit somebody's windshield when somebody, cuts us off in driving. Same thing with human performance or a learning-based approach. Is the better approach is when something goes wrong is to do what you did, is to say, all right, let's gather, let's talk, and check intentions. And you didn't really mention this, but with your kids, you wouldn't need to, because I'm sure your kids had the best intentions. They wouldn't put a baseball through a plate glass window just to see what happened, right? So I'm betting you're saying maybe. So what I'd always try to do is sort of ask, okay, what were you intending to do? Remember the after action review questions? The very first one is, what did we set out to do? Basically, be transparent with your intentions. So it's all about, are you acting in good faith? Were you trying to do something that we all agreed is important or reasonable to do? And if you were, then we're good. It's when people are trying to do something not transparent or not ethical or not above board, that's when all the rest of the stuff kind of fails. So there are some people out there who advocate, blame solves nothing. I can't sign on to that, because in the cases where somebody is really trying to do something they shouldn't do, their buddies know they shouldn't have been doing it, we know they shouldn't have been doing it, that may be appropriate to say, listen, you can't work here anymore, or this, you got to go back through training or whatever. But this isn't going to work out that way. Right. So I can't sign off for that. What I would say instead is, blame is an addiction. If you start going down the blame road, you might find that you like it. And that's going to be the problem. Many leaders I've seen get addicted to blame, and anything that comes across their desk, they want to go, well, find me who to hold responsible. There's a real rush to doing that. That's the addiction speaking. That's a real problem. I don't know if that makes any sense or if that answers your question or not.
No, I mean, I've been in lots of conversations over the years, and maybe we're talking about implementing a safety program or something like that. And every once in a while, you get a company or the management team at a company, and it's almost the first thing out of their mouth, which is like, well, how are we going to discipline people if they don't follow that? And right there, it's like, oh, this might be a challenge to, because you're talking about getting buy-in and that type of stuff. And if you're going straight to the blame game or discipline, then that's really ruling like a heavy-handed approach, and basically, it's our way or the highway, and then you don't get that buy-in, and you don't get that trust feeling from the people that are
and whoever you fired. I mean, let's say an error happens and your company says, well, we're gonna fire that person. That's our decision. That's holding them accountable. And some people go, yeah, justice was done. You fired that person. Well, let's look at the reality of that. That person is going to leave your company where they got your training, your experience. They just had, you just spent money to involuntarily train them by having that error, right? And they learned a lot from that. What are they going to do? They're going to take that training, that wisdom, that experience, and they're going to go work for one of your competitors, because they're going to go work probably in the same field. You just fired them, and you took all that training that you wound up giving them involuntarily, and you wound up giving that to your competitor, right? If they were making an honest a choice. Now, if they were doing something they shouldn't have been doing, and they know they shouldn't have been doing it, everybody else knows, then that's a different story. You don't necessarily want that person working for you, but the people who are trying to do the right things, it's all about, it kind of comes back to the intention. What was their intention? What were they trying to do? Yeah.
Okay. So what have we touched on so far? Learning-based approach. We talked about after-action reviews.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned psychological safety.
You want to hear a neat study, a little research study on psychological safety?
Sure.
Amy Edmondson, who's the world's primary researcher now on psychological safety. She's up at Harvard, written several books, one called The Fearless Organization, which is a great title for a book. She did a research study asking CEOs two questions. And I cite this when I do my workshops and especially my event reviews. The first question she asked executives were, out of all the failures that happen in your company, what percentage are truly blameworthy? What percentage of failures in your organization are truly blameworthy? And she's asking executives, presumably because they have access to all the information, right? There's nothing hidden from them. They know as much as anybody can. And I asked people, what do you think she came up with, or they came up with? And the answer, you want to give it a try?
So the question is, so I'm
Question
the
is,
CEO of a company, and
what percentage of failures in your organization are truly blameworthy? Meaning somebody did something they should not have been doing. They know it, you know it, everybody knows it.
in any failure, like an equipment failure
Yeah,
or
yeah,
safety,
yeah,
anything, truly blameworthy.
yeah.
I don't know, 7%.
7%.
That's
So I get ranges all over from 0 to 80, 90%, something like this. What Edmondson found, the actual results, about 2 to 5%. So you're right in that range. Let's say, just for simplicity, about 5%.
mm-hmm.
The second question she asked was, what percentage of failures in your organization get treated as if they are blameworthy?
Well, that would be like 85%.
She came in, clocked in at about 80%, 70 to 90%. So you're right on the mark for that. And I show this to people, and you can see the shoulders just kind of go like this, and they kind of go, that's us. Yes, there are a few things. There are a few people doing things they really shouldn't be doing, but that's a single digit minority, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you fire those people or get rid of them or whatever. That's why I say blame solves nothing. No, for that 5% of people, blame does solve something. But for 95% of the things that go wrong, we should be taking a learning-based approach. But in most organizations, they're taking a control-based approach 80 or 90% of the time. And that's the problem. We should be taking a learning-based approach in 95% of the cases that go wrong.
So how does that tie into psychological safety, or what is psychological safety?
Psychological safety is, it's got a couple of different definitions. The short bottom line up front definition is it's trust at an organizational level. Psychological safety has been defined as the belief that you're not going to get punished by your organization or shamed or ridiculed by your peers for coming up with honest critiques, challenging questions, inconvenient truths, as they say, or honest errors. Again, honest errors, as long as you're acting in good faith with good intentions. In good teams, in the healthiest, best teams, you can say challenging things. You can ask tough questions. You can even give tough feedback as long as it comes with respect. If you know that you're safe and that your team is not going to punish you, you're not going to get fired or demoted, and that your buddies and your teammates are not going to look down on you for being honest.
Oh, okay. So psychological safety is not a brand of safety. It is feeling safe psychologically.
Yes.
In this environment.
Yes.
That I can say these. Okay.
Yeah.
So that
it's like you're correct. No, that distinction you made was bang on, was perfect. It's not a, you said it right. Yeah.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's, you mentioned it early on that, or maybe it was before we started recording. Like, to me, that just sounded like this is an organization that has strong leadership not necessarily strong management. And
Yeah.
so, and that's a to me, there was a course I took a long time ago. I think it was called Managing Things, Leading People.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. And that's exactly,
Mhm.
what it was about. And so if you have a group of individuals who can come to the leader and feel safe that, they're bringing up a concern that might even make the leader look bad, let's say.
Mhm.
They know that it's safe. I can do this. He's going to appreciate it, or she's going to appreciate it. And yeah, that's great. That's
Mhm.
fantastic.
Mhm.
Um, okay. And then moving on, I'm just looking at your handout here, and you've got transform investigations, blame is an addiction. We've kind of talked about that a bit.
Yeah.
When it comes to the investigation, like is there anything else other than treating it as a learning opportunity, that you do specifically, like a or that you'd recommend with investigations?
Yeah. So this is an article actually I just published. It just got published by the International Institute for Risk and Safety Management. It's a little bit of a mouthful. They're out in London, and it's a 4-page article that they just published, and I put it up on LinkedIn for anybody watching this. They can get it. And it's a good overview of the kind of the 6-step process that I came up with. Root cause analyses. I've gotten training in a couple of root cause methodologies, have done a few, but not that many. Have helped out with some. Root cause analyses, I think, are really good for mechanistic problems, metallurgy, chemistry, lubrication going bad in pumps, stuff like that, where in any kind of a designed system, you can usually find this failed because this failed, because this failed, because this failed, because the wrong grease got put in at some point 6 months ago. All right, that's a root cause. But you can do that in a design system. But in an adaptive system, pretty much anyone where human judgment is having to be used,
Yeah.
you're not going to find a root cause, almost never. And so for that, we need a different type of investigation, and I don't even call it an investigation, I call it an event review. And it basically is sort of a semi-structured way of saying, okay, how does this job usually get done? And what were some of the individual actions, situational factors, supervisory factors, organizational factors, cultural factors that led to this thing going the wrong way?
Mm-hmm.
And then what would the guys and the women involved with this job, the frontline experts, what would they do to change the system, change the process, change the tools, the vehicles, whatever it is that's being used to use this thing? And my event review process is kind of a structured way to ask all those 6 questions for the big 3 to 7 anomalies that you find in any incident. I developed it over about the course of about 10 years or so. And again, just published it. So it's a good overview. That's what I would do. And step 1 of the 6-step process is lead an after action review. So if you've taken a learning based approach in your organization and you're already doing after action reviews, the day when something goes wrong, you don't come to your team and say, well, since something went wrong, we're going to do this brand new thing that you've never seen before. And everybody goes, what's that? When something goes wrong, you go, hey, every Thursday we do an after action review. So this week we're going to do it, but this week we're going to do it on the thing that happened on Tuesday. And everybody goes, I know the process. I know what we're going to do. I know you're not out to get me because we do this basically every week for jobs that go well. So you start with an after action review. And then if you need to, you go do the other 4 steps, 5 steps.
So so there's an incident that I remember. It was a place I used to work, and it was using a box knife or dacto knife or whatever.
Box cutter kind of thing.
Yeah. To open a box.
Yep.
and not exactly sure what the gentleman was doing, but ended up stabbing himself in the leg.
Hmm.
The next day, those knives were banned.
Yeah.
For,
Yeah.
and so I guess using after action reviews, would you do them when there is an incident like that, or is the thought that we'll do it like, hey, we successfully opened this box this week, let's do an after action review? And how
I
would someone?
I wouldn't do an after action review on just opening a box. A good rule of thumb is you only do after action reviews for team-based jobs, something that takes more than one person. I guess you can, and for the folks that work alone, I don't want to kind of rule you folks out. Like, for example, relay technicians working in substations, electric utility substations. This is a little bit more in your world. Or
Mhm.
electricians, right? Many of those guys and women, they work alone. So they may be thinking, oh, I guess we never get to do after action reviews. No, that's not the case. What you can do is after your shift or at the end of the week or whatever, sit down either on Zoom or even just call up by phone another person doing what you do. Maybe you're working wiring one hotel and you got a buddy on your team working wiring another hotel. They weren't there, they didn't see your stuff, but they know what you're doing well enough that you can debrief or do an after action review
Mhm.
of your job with them, even just by the phone. And they're going to resonate and go, well, did you think of this? Well, how about this? Well, why didn't you do this? What would happen if you did this? That's how guys and women who work alone, right, can do it.
Mhm.
So, but it has to be on a job that's complex and worthy enough of that kind of a discussion. Pretty much doing just opening a box, unless that's what you're doing all day long. I don't know if I would do an after action review on that when it goes well. When something goes wrong, sure. Um, I would do an after action review and just go, okay, what did you intend to do? How do you usually do it? That's a great question from a guy named Eric Holnagel, who wrote a book called Safety One versus Safety Two, and said, when something goes wrong, don't make your first question, what went wrong?
Mhm.
Because that's going to put you on a real slippery slope from what went wrong to who screwed up. So instead, what he says is when something goes wrong, ask, okay, how does this job usually get done right most of the time?
Mhm.
You start with how does it go right? Then you got the expert, the field expert saying, well, this is how we usually do it. And they're going to usually tell you a lot of information about how it goes right. And when they're ready, they'll say, but that's not what happened on Tuesday. And then they'll get into here's what went wrong. So for the box cutting thing, sure, I'd probably do an after action review when that went wrong, but I'm going to hope that up until that point with my team, I'm hoping we would have done after action reviews with that team, maybe not on just opening boxes, but
Yeah.
on other stuff so they'd know the process. Then when something went wrong, we're going to say, hey, folks, you're probably going to know these 5 questions. We're going to ask it about the box cutting incident. Okay, what did you set out to do? So what did you actually do? So how did it turn out that way? What would you do the same next time? What would you do differently next time? And go with that. And transforming investigations, sometimes that may be all you need right there. Write up the answers to those 5 questions, come up with your corrective actions. If you want to call them that, that's the answer to kind of the last 2 questions and go with that. For simple stuff, that's all you need. That's step 1 of the event review. And if you got a more complex event or incident, then look at steps 2 through 6.
Awesome. I think Jake, we're coming up on time, so I want to be respectful of that. Just to this has been fantastic. Tons of great stuff, and I know you've got a lot of stuff out there, whether it's on LinkedIn or your website. Maybe just point people in the direction
Yeah,
that you'd like to them to check it out.
you bet. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I don't know if you can put a LinkedIn or something up
Yeah,
there,
we
but
can put
my
everything.
my name. Just Google or go on LinkedIn. Look up my name. There's only myself, my wife, maybe my daughter. I think my aunt are like that, and I'm the only person that does error based stuff or human reliability. And you can find my website. That's at reliableorg.com. Just reliableorg.com. And that's it. Connect with me. If I can ever help you out.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on.
John, thanks so much. It was a pleasure. Talk to you soon.